Brian, we're doing a dynasty price check on Saquon Barkley today. So I have a trade for you. Pretty simple. It's a 12-team super flex, half PPR, half tight end premium. So you're getting a full point per reception for tight end. Start 10. You want Saquon Barkley or do you want the 112 in this year's rookie draft?
Yeah, this one and the next trade we're going to talk about, I think, are like really good examples of. Oh, it really depends on where your team's at. Like if you actually earned the 112, like yeah, trade that and get Saquon Barkley.
Let's say both teams are wanting to compete this year. Yeah, we'll just approach it that way.
It's kind of tricky in that sense because if I want to compete, I'm keeping Saquon. So I like that side of it if both teams are trying to compete.
What about in a vacuum? What would you take here?
Yeah, I think it's pretty close. Like I've thrown some trades out there for Barkley in a couple of my leagues, and I was mostly offering 2 seconds. I don't have a late first, so it's a little bit harder to say this or that. But yeah, I think a couple of second round picks is a fair trade for Barkley, and I think that's like kind of what you should be looking to do with Barkley if you're trying to rebuild your team. Like get a couple of pieces for him. Ideally, one of those seconds is a high second, like in the top 4. So it's a top 16 pick basically, and get a little something on the top. I like that.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for both sides whether you're competing or not to do this trade. Like I know you said you want Barkley, but also I think an aspect to always, if you want to always kind of be competing, is to know when to trade guys and get value for them and not be left holding the bag, right? Because you could still get a good piece at the 112, especially in this year's draft. We don't know what that's going to be. Wide receiver 6 or QB 5 or 6, maybe RB1 in the NFL draft. So, yeah, it's a really interesting one to me. And again, we're doing this on March 10th, the day before free agency starts. Saquon doesn't have a team right now. Does this change? I know you said, so in a vacuum, you said Saquon?
Yeah. Just to touch on what you just said about the 112 real quick. That it could easily, we kind of said this in the last video about the 110. It's like that could easily be the RB1, whoever that is in this class, or yeah, like you said, like maybe wide receiver 5 or 6 or something like that. So you just got to know who do you think you're picking at 112 and kind of value them accordingly.
Yeah. And again, I normally don't like making trades like this for running backs that it's tough to see beyond the next year for them. And I think there's only a handful of guys I do that with. But Saquon's kind of on the fringe of that because I truly believe, like if Saquon goes to the Texans or the Minnesota Vikings, I think he can be like what CMC is to the 49ers, like the centerpiece of their offense, built around it. It just makes the offense go. MVP votes or, consideration, scoring a bunch of touchdowns, catching the ball, doing everything. I think he can be that. We haven't seen that because the Giants have sucked since he's been there and he's been injured. So it's a tough one for me because I kind of like, man, it's like when do you put your biases aside versus I think the process here is getting the 112. I think if you can get a first for Saquon, it's to kind of take it. But I also feel like part of me is coming into it and my biases of like, I think Saquon's going to be this next year, like potentially RB1 overall if he gets to the right team. So, man, it's a tough one for sure.
I was going to say, and just so we remember also, last year wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible, basically around 1,200 total yards. But I mean, the year before that, he was over 1,600 total, rushing and receiving with 10 touchdowns. And that was on the Giants, with, a terrible team kind of thing, it's hard to remember. So I don't know. We still have seen it recently enough to where I think he's still got it. But I mean, you kind of like, even if you look at the 21 season, it's like, wow, that's really bad, like about a little over 800 total yards in 13 games. But I don't know. I think he's
ACL, I think.
Yeah, he's still an elite player, I would say. Like, he hasn't been run into the ground yet, and he can win at all levels of the field. So
yeah, it reminds me so much of CMC. And I know CMC was probably had a couple more, one or two more elite seasons than Barkley had. Barkley's rookie year was a pretty damn elite. I think he was like the RB1 that year. Yeah, in 2018 in PPR he was. But it reminds me so much, a guy on a crappy team who's had injury problems. Can he get to the right team now and be like, take it to the next level kind of, So another trade here, which is an interesting one. This is a 12-team Superflex full PPR. Start 8, so pretty shallow starting roster. And start 8, by the way, start 10, whatever. That's what you're starting, not including kickers and defenses if you play with that. So do you want Saquon Barkley or do you want Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, Aiden O'Connell, and a 2025 second?
Yeah, this one is it's kind of along that same lines of like, it depends on like what you're trying to do. Like that's a lot of like potential assets kind of thing. I don't think Aiden O'Connell's like really worth a whole lot. But I mean, he could still be the starter for one more year for the Raiders. In case people don't know who he is, he's the Raiders quarterback. Or he was last year anyways, when Garoppolo went down. But I don't know. I could totally see them using O'Connell. And, Treylon Burks, like, he's just about, cuttable. Like, I think you can still hold on to him. I don't know. It's tough. And then the Dotson thing is kind of along those same lines. Like, there's a lot of good potential here with, like, the pick, the second-year quarterback, the third-year receivers who we haven't really seen yet. But I think that's a good, if you're trying to rebuild your team, I think that's probably enough. The hard part about it too, though, is that means you're cutting, 2 other guys. So, I mean, if your team's, terrible, then maybe it's not that much of a stretch. And at least you get to kick out the 2025 second. Like, you don't have to worry about cutting anyone for that just yet. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, I think no matter what, rebuilding, competing in a vacuum, I think I'm taking Saquon here just because of the start 8 aspect of it. And like, it's very shallow starting only 8 players. And 2 of them are quarterbacks, right? So you're starting 6 non-quarterbacks. You need, all that really matters in this league are like top end guys. And I don't know if Treylon Burks, Jahan Dotson, Aiden O'Connell, I don't think will be there. I don't know if any of those guys are going to be like difference makers in a start 8. I don't even know if they're going to be difference makers in a start 10, to be honest. But there's potential, yeah. But in a start 8, man, you need guys. You need the top 12, multiple top 12 players, and so I'm going to keep Saquon here. I liked this one because it is intriguing because you see all those pieces. But when you throw the start 8 in there, I think it shows you how important it is to really evaluate, like, well, how many people am I starting, right? And if I'm starting Treylon Burks in a start 8, like my team probably sucks, like, so I guess that's my point of view on that trade. But yeah, definitely an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, like sometimes when you see too many things, like 4 things for one guy, it's kind of like, you can never be like super excited about those 4 things because they're probably not very good as of now. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to make your own evaluation of them kind of thing. And I do agree with what you're saying. Like, it kind of just seems like a bunch of garbage. Like, you're recycling a bunch of cans to get the quarter kind of a thing, like,
yeah. When you could just have the quarter already, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So you gotta be careful with the knowing how many you start. Now, if you said this was like a start 11 or 12, I'd consider the other side especially if I believed in one or both those receivers. So, but yeah, start 8 makes it pretty easy. Saquon here, and again, you can make a move before tomorrow. He could get assigned as early as tomorrow, but what if he goes to Houston? What if he goes to Minnesota? What if he goes to the Chargers? And we know they're going to run the ball top 5 in rush attempts. I think there's
isn't tomorrow just legal tampering? It's not, you can't actually sign him yet, right?
You don't officially sign, but like, okay.
You can get the deal set up.
Basically, yeah. And it's very rare that people back out on it, although it has happened. Like JD McKissick in the Bills that one year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is it for this video. We'll be putting out more of these. We're going to talk about Derrick Henry next. We already have a Garrett Wilson one out there, so check that out. And we will be back soon.